all of a sudden, out of the blue, we saw some regulatory action being taken by the Department of Labor, the United States Department of Labor under Secretary Robert Reich. And what happened is that we all of a sudden had 8 investigators come out from Washington, D.C. to start investigating our company for wage and hour violations. And these investigators were directly from the Department of Labor. We were devastated because not only were we spending the resources on all the other charges that were being filed, but now we had a formal U.S. Department of Labor agency coming out to go through all our pay stubs and check for wage and hour violations. And we just couldn't understand it. It's akin to all of a sudden the IRS coming into your backyard and starting to do an audit. And we knew we had done nothing wrong, but we had to exert a tremendous amount of resources in responding to the Department of Labor's requests and dealing with this investigation. And so now we had 8 full-time paid organizers coming after the company. We had the U.S. federal government through the NLRB that we had to deal with their charges. We had the Department of Labor coming out doing this investigation. And then we had heard from one of our biggest clients that they had received a call from the regional administrator from the Western United States within the Department of Labor at their campus in San Jose, California. And what this individual said to one of the managers of the computer manufacturing company was that he was a very busy man and that he was doing an investigation of our company and that he was eventually going to find our company doing wrong things, and that our penalties were going to be somewhere in the neighborhood between $8 and $9 million, and that he knew that we would be unable to pay those fines, and so he was prepared to invoke what they call the hot goods law, whereby he would be allowed to seize the products of this computer manufacturing company to pay for our fines. Well, needless to say, the company, the manager, fortunately had typed this conversation into the email system and broadcast it throughout the company. And so everybody within the company knew what was happening. And quite frankly, this is an official. It was appointed by President Clinton. That had a lot of credibility, and it did intimidate the customer quite a bit. And we had to go down and explain what was happening, try to defend ourselves against an investigation that had not been concluded, and convince everybody that we had not done anything wrong. There was nothing to be worried about, but this is just part of a campaign. And fortunately, the customer stood by us. It was quite remarkable that we were able to keep everything intact. But at this point, we had to be very proactive in our efforts to combat what was happening, because this newest investigation was also included in the SEIU's campaign of intimidation and in their flyers. So now we had the NLRB charges, the lawsuits, the Department of Labor investigation, and the union went so far as to then take this investigation and this threat of seizing these computers, and they put a full-page ad in the New York Times, because of course this company is a New York Stock Exchange company. So they put this ad in the New York Times that said, "Warning, federal government may seize this computer company's computers to pay for fines of this building maintenance company." And we really had to fight hard to keep everybody on board about what our goal was, which was being pro-employees' right to vote in a federally sanctioned secret ballot election. So what I ended up doing is I filed a charge with the United States Inspector General. And the charge was that this individual was colluding with the union to intimidate this company as part of a union corporate campaign. So this was over the course of a year and a half that this continued on. We were still suffering, the negative publicity about these investigations that were ongoing, the lawsuits that were ongoing, and we were losing business. Then one day I received a call from the U.S. Inspector General, and I had provided them with a lot of information about these so-called corporate campaigns, and I had given them a series of articles that had been written about this particular campaign that had been waged in not only Sacramento but Washington, D.C., Denver, Colorado, New York, exact same campaign. They even call it a certain title. And so we were able to generate articles, and one of the articles that was generated was contained in this packet, and the U.S. Inspector General called me and asked me if I had actually read each and every one of those articles, and I said that I had. And then they called my attention to a particular article that was written by an individual whose name was Rick Sawyer. And Mr. Sawyer was the president of the local chapter of SEIU here in California. And he was the individual who was appointed by President Clinton to be the regional administrator of the Western United States for the Department of Labor, who was the individual who called the large computer manufacturing company with the threat of using the hot goods law. So it was clear at this point that he, in fact, was a former employee of SEIU, now appointed within the Department of Labor, and abused his power to initiate the investigation of our company. The U.S. Inspector General relayed this information and the facts associated with his involvement in the campaign, and Secretary Reich had no alternative except to fire the individual for his collusion with the union in this particular campaign. We were ecstatic. It was covered in the front page of the Wall Street Journal. And ultimately, the union pleaded with the President Clinton to restore his employment within the Department of Labor, which never did happen. I was asked to testify before the House Subcommittee on Investigation and Oversight on this whole matter, and both Republicans and Democrats were very sympathetic to what had happened. Now, at the conclusion of the investigation by the Department of Labor, it was quite interesting, because after taxpayers had paid to have 8 investigators from the DOL come out and do this investigation on behalf of the union, it was concluded that our company had underpaid our employees, I believe it was $340 during a 4-year period that they investigated, but at the same time, we had overpaid our employees by $673. So the net effect was that we had overpaid our employees, and that was the conclusion of the investigation. And so the campaign continued on, even though we were slowly proving our innocence on all the charges. And ultimately, we agreed with the mayor of Sacramento to allow a couple of the buildings to go union, just as a way to stop the campaign. But again, we feel we did the right thing in taking the stance, and we still have the stance today, that employees have the right to vote on unionization, and that card check recognition is not an acceptable way for unions to organize employees, because it doesn't allow them to go behind a curtain in a federally sanctioned secret ballot election to express their views on the issue of organizing in an environment that is free of coercion and intimidation. So that's our experience.